This is our presentation on the United States' imperialism in Hawaii by Burton, Eliza, Colin, and Abby.
Some rationales for American imperialism for Hawaii can be seen in the political cartoon from Puck magazine. First of all, there was some religious backing for taking over Hawaii, such as the Christians wanting to sort of take over. And in the political cartoon, it alludes to a marriage between the U.S. and Hawaii. Culturally speaking, the Hawaii was sort of seen as the harmless one, indicative of the clothing. And America, specifically the man from Alabama, was encouraging the events to unfold, protecting them, because he believes in expansionist ideas. Thus, white man's birth.
The second primary source used to display America's rationale for imperialism is another political cartoon. This cartoon depicts the white man's burden by showing how the people of the recently conquered nations are better off than when they were under Spanish rule. While this also has hints of nationalism, it still provides evidence that American felt natives needed to be saved. Additionally, this image alludes to another reason for imperializing, which was to fight against the Spanish and let the far superior culture of the United States reign supreme.
The third primary source used to show America's rationale for imperialism is a painting of missionaries in Hawaii. This painting alludes to both the religious and racial aspects of America's rationale. From a religious standpoint, the image demonstrates the apparent superiority of the Christian religion, as well as how the Americans colonizing Hawaii completely eradicated the native Hawaiian religion by ways of mass conversion/baptisms. This image is an example of how such a baptism. In terms of racial factors, the contrast between fully dressed white men and naked natives symbolizes a power disparity, an inherent belief in the author of the superiority of whiteness, which stems from Darwinism.
Before America imperialized Hawaii, Hawaii exported two main goods to America, cotton and sugar. These exports were in small quantities and had no long-lasting effects on the Hawaiian economy pre-American imperialization. After Hawaii was annexed into the United States, exports increased dramatically in a very diverse manner. More goods began to flow between America and Hawaii, and a larger variety of goods were introduced to the Hawaiian agriculture scene. Post-annexation, sanctions were lifted from Hawaii, and free trade began between America and Hawaii. These trade routes also brought the diversification of the Hawaiian population, as many white Europeans and Americans migrated to Hawaii. Thus, Hawaii's population, economy, and overall state prosperity increased dramatically after 1983.
These two flags, the Republic of Hawaii and the Hawaiian sovereignty movement, shows the rise of nationality amongst indigenous people. To start, looking at the Republic of Hawaii's flag, which was at the time a provisional government that was sort of a puppet to the white settlers, you can see the clear English influence, with the British Jack, of course, being English influence, and the well-known red, white, and blue stripes sort of taken from the American flag. Interestingly, looking at the Hawaiian sovereignty movement's flag, they flip it on its head, showing the distress and how bad it was.
One of the largest types of indigenous responses to the United States' expansion into Hawaii was their resistance and creation of new states. The documents shown on the slide are two different petitions against annexing Hawaii, full of names, and according to the article, they were the newly formed Hawaiian Patriotic League, composed of Native Hawaiians successfully petitioned the United States government and Congress in opposition of the treaty.
The third indigenous response to expansion was in the form of a rebellion. In 1887, the Missionary Party, made up of descendants of Protestant missionaries, forced King Kalakaua to sign the Bayonet Constitution, thus stripping the king of most of his power. Later, the Wilcox Rebellion of 1889, led by a native Hawaiian called the Iron Duke, failed to revoke the policy instilled by the Bayonet Constitution. The primary source shown on the document is a political cartoon making fun of the Bayonet Constitution because the king rests on a throne toppled by revolutions.
This table shows the Hawaiian sugar production from 1850 to 1999. Throughout the duration of this time period, America annexed Hawaii in 1898. Post-imperialization, Hawaiian sugar production increased dramatically, which in turn stimulated the economic prosperity of the Hawaiian economy, as well as increased America's profit on exports. After 1900, the next 70 years represented a prosperous Hawaiian economy as the number of sugar exports steadily increased. In turn, one can infer that the annexation of Hawaii into America increased the insinuation for economic development. The second primary source shows 5 firms: Castle and Cook, Alexander and Baldwin, Brewer and Co., Theo Davis and Co., and American Factors. These were companies that originated in either America or Europe that came to dominate the sugar industry. Originally established to provide financial, labor recruiting, transportation, and marketing services to plantations, they gradually acquired the plantations and also gained control of other vital industries such as the banking, insurance, retailing, and shipping. By 1933, their plantations produced 96% of the sugar crop. The Big Five's dominance would continue until the rise of the tourism industry and the statehood induced U.S. and foreign films to enter Hawaii's markets. Between these 5 companies, a holistic monopoly was created that prevented economic advantage over the sugar industry from outsiders.
The Great Mahele is a widely known document passed by the King of Hawaii in 1844 that privatized a substantial portion of public land in Hawaii at the expense of the native commoners. Prior to this document, private land did not exist. Arguably, an even greater cause for control shifting to American imperialists is the Non-Judicial Mortgage Act of 1874, which allowed for the private auction of a deed without judicial oversight. These American planters bought large parcels of land, allowing them to control the means of production for the raw material of sugar. They employed an essentially feudal system to exploit native Hawaiian labor, allowing them to ship large amounts of sugar to the Americas, providing great personal economic benefit.
This is an excerpt from the 2011 Act passed by the government of Hawaii, transitioning the laws on mortgage ownership from non-judicial to judicial. It shows the way the previous laws impacted Native Hawaiians, as they now have an opportunity to defend their land ownership. Act 48 is the link to the actual bill.
The causes and effects of migration to Hawaii from the U.S. can be seen in the primary sources shown on the slide. The poster on the right shows how America marketed Hawaii as a commercialized destination. This caused an influx of vacationers and establishment of a successful hospitality presence in Hawaii. The image on the left shows how the construction of churches in Hawaii in response to a large migration of Catholics and Americans.
These 2 sources also show the causes and effects of migration in Hawaii. On the left is a picture showing Japanese residents in Hawaii. Japanese, Korean, Filipino, Chinese, and African Americans came to Hawaii to work on American-controlled sugar and pineapple farms alongside Hawaiian natives. The image on the right depicts Stella Yellowshirt, a native Hawaiian who ruled over multiple tribes on the main island known as Honolulu. Before Hawaii was annexed into America, Europe and American agriculture enterprises dominated economic exchange, but Native Hawaiians still had a strong foothold in political and social customs.
Because of the eventual annexation of Hawaii, it led or caused many other territories around the Pacific Ocean to eventually be captured. This can be seen in the political cartoons to the left. And the top one, it shows a Spaniard coming from Europe losing territory to the expanding Uncle Sam, while underneath it is a bald eagle whose wings touch both the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific Ocean, with many islands in between. Finally, looking to the map on the right, There are white arrows pointing to all of U.S.'s territories in the Pacific Ocean or nearby places. Additionally, the eventual takeover of Hawaii led to a large economic gain. This can be seen between the years 1880 and 1890, where there's a roughly 4 million increase in capital. This thus encouraged the Americans to continue its expansionism as it led to an improving economy. Finally, here are the sources. What should be duly noted is that in Hawaii, there was a large movement to sort of cover up what happened here. And because of the more recent present day nationalistic movement, also that sovereignty movement seen earlier in the flag, a lot of new sources have been recovered, and soon more will come.